Good afternoon, greater Philadelphia area. This is Toole Time Real Estate Radio on WWDB 860 AM. I'm Tom Toole. She's Sarah Tymon. We both work at the Tom Toole Sales Group at RE/MAX Main Line, the number one RE/MAX team in Pennsylvania since 2018. And we are talking about the tariff fever that I think has everyone a little paralyzed right now about what's going on in the market. Obviously, very serious stuff when you're losing your 401k and your assets go down. These cycles do happen, and some advice for consumers. We've also got statistics behind these office exclusive listings, these private exclusive listings. I'm curious to see if you're dealing with that or not in the marketplace. And lastly, we're going to go a little off topic here. Apparently, the dire wolf no longer extinct. Very interesting. There might be a real life Jurassic Park coming to a neighborhood near you. So be careful, especially if you're in the north. So if you get some value out of this, you'll like what you hear, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Sarah, what do you think about these tariffs? Are they paralyzing the market right now? Because I've seen all kinds of reactions on social media. Break it down for us. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing about them a lot. It's all over social media. It's all over the radio. And so there's definitely like a lot of buzz about them. And I think it has translated into, people's decision making or kind of like factoring into offers and factoring into how to make offers and, do they want to pull money out of different places?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what you said there is very smart. I mean, I've seen, I'm friends with a lot of real estate agents on like social media and things like that. And deals are falling apart because people's money isn't what they thought it was, especially like a cash purchase or even like a downsize. Like people are just worried. And I mean, and this is not the first time it's happened in the market where the Dow's dropped and the stock markets had a little bit of a dip. It's not going to be the last time, but it does cause people to hesitate. And what we saw happen not only with people's cash and what's in the market, we also saw mortgage rates hit a year-to-date low that coincided with these market disruptions from these tariffs. And, there may be a silver lining here for some buyers, especially the ones that have the ability to pivot and maybe finance more, have some alternatives to purchase. I mean, last week we were seeing mortgage rates. They were coming into the, like 6.5%. 6 5/8 range, which is the lowest we've seen year to date. If you look at the purchase application data, it's been little uneven. We've had 6 positive readings, meaning week over week purchase applications went up, 3 negative readings, and 3 flat prints for the year. So it's been there's been some ups and downs, even though we're only in the first week of April here. So I do see this as a positive for some folks, but regardless, it's going to create some hesitation. So when people get nervous, what advice do you have for them? Because I think a lot of agents, they're gonna close very aggressively. They're gonna tell them everything's fine, even though it may not be. Others aren't gonna know how to respond, and there's a third group that knows what to say or how to navigate these things. What are you doing with your clients right now, Sarah?
I would recommend rather than doing like a hard close to tell people to think of the worst case scenario, and kind of plan for that. So like if the numbers and if everything makes sense in the worst case scenario, then you're still in good shape. If it doesn't, then there's often, the best case, the worst case, and then the likely one is in the middle. So taking that into account as well, but you need to feel secure that if things don't, improve by a certain time, that you're still going to be okay.
That is such great advice because there are these questions. We actually train on this. Like, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? What's the likely outcome? And there is opportunity when people are pulling back from the market. You think about how competitive it's been for a lot of buyers, and you usually see the buyers are the ones that pull out. Rarely is a seller taking their home off the market unless there's like another transaction tied to it. And since rates have dropped a little bit, that could make a big difference for a lot of people, especially in like the median and lower price points. So you got to be careful with your messaging as an agent, because if you're like too excited about this, well, someone could have lost like a couple $100,000 in the market.
Right.
If you're, too pessimistic about it, people may be like, well, I don't know if I should.
Right. If you're telling me that you're terrified,
Yeah.
like,
Well, and this is what people do. And I think the messaging is, hey, like, yeah, there's been some volatility in the market and we've seen rates come down. How would lower rates impact your plans? And let's sit down and talk about it. And I think that's really the way you want to look at this here. And this is really the first time we've seen something other than like the jobs reports or inflation targets have a positive effect on mortgage rates in a very long time. Have you seen anyone get back into the market because rates have come down? Have you had anyone like that you've re-engaged because of these lower rates?
No, not specifically rate related.
Okay. Now, you did have some folks that kind of had to change their plans. So can you walk us through what that conversation was like? Because I'm imagining the people watching, and I imagine that the folks that are listening, there's probably some people that like don't know what to do right now. And
yeah, certainly people who were planning on like putting more down or being all cash. And then, a couple of weeks ago, it would have been very easy to pull they would have just pulled the money out of the market. And now it's like, this isn't the time to do that. So yeah, just kind of pivoting and readjusting. And, being like on top of what's going on each day and how to move forward.
Well, and this is where it's important for real estate agents to understand the basics of financing a home. I mean, I don't think I don't think most agents can really have this conversation with people.
Right.
Are you on the same page there?
Yeah.
So if you're not able to understand it, I would do as an agent, I would be like reading things, right? You go to like nowbam.com, you go to Housing Wire, listen to some podcasts, get educated yourself and understand exactly what these look like. Because once the tariff announcement happened, it was a 10% blanket tax on all foreign imports and 25% on cars and a sliding scale for individual countries. The stocks dipped, bond yields fell, and when the yield goes down, obviously rates go down. It's kind of a delayed reaction, and rates came down to 6.63% according to Mortgage News Daily. So, and I don't think a lot of people understand exactly how this works. Now, we did see the market kind of rebound and rates bounce back up this week. So I want to play a clip here from Tom Ferry. If you don't know who Tom Ferry is, he's someone I've worked personally with for a very long time, real estate coach in the space. And I think he's got some good advice, not only for agents, but also for clients. We're going to try to play this clip here. Let's see if it works. Okay, well, I need to unmute it first, so that's going to be my fault here. This is what happens on the radio. I thought we had this all figured out. All right, let's try this one more time. Here we go.
One thing I learned a long time ago is don't panic, remain calm. Now, I know there's some clients out there that were freaking out over the stock market last week and maybe for a little bit Monday morning, but look at the late afternoon rally and look what's already happening this morning. It looks like this was just a shift, not a crisis. So my question for you is, what will you do? Think back to the pandemic. What did you do? You stayed calm, you served your clients, you over-communicated, and you marketed like crazy. I'd recommend the same now.
All right, so what do you think about that clip, Sarah? I mean, because this is, people are losing their minds right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we need to expect coming up is there isn't a path that we can predict for how this is going to go, right? Mm-hmm. So all you can kind of work with is what you've got, and knowing that I would assume for the foreseeable future, there's not going to be a clear answer. Like, we're not going to be able to say like, all right, this is what's going to happen with the tariffs and this is how it's going to play out. I think there's going to be a lot of upsets and changes and, things will go one way, then the other way. That, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's going to be what we're going to be looking at for a little bit. And you almost have to just like, I mean, and all of that is like extremely important and matters a lot and is going to like, certainly account into things, but you almost have to just kind of like look at what you can control and what you can see.
I agree with that totally. And, I've talked to a lot of economists about this, Logan Motoshami, some people locally, and what they're saying is like, this is a lot of this is like a negotiation tactic. And unfortunately, the U.S. has not been in a great spot from like a trading perspective because with what they pay for imports and exports, I'm not going to get into all that. What I do know is that like if you looked at what happened earlier in the year, like the tariffs were on again, off again for Mexico and Canada, like twice right after President Trump got inaugurated. There was a 1988 clip of, did you see this, of Donald Trump on the Oprah Winfrey show? I want to see if I can play this here because it was, he basically said, I need to make our allies pay in this 1988 clip because Oprah asked, what would you do differently if you were to be the U.S. president? I mean, talk about foreshadowing. And he said, I'd make all our allies pay a fair share. Here's the clip. I actually can play this. Hold on. Let's see if I can do this right.
Last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily. I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion. And yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Open. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
All right, so we'll cut it there, and I think the point is, like, this has been a plan for a while, which is pretty interesting. And when you look at what's going to happen here, I think that I think this is part of the negotiation to try to eliminate some of the debt that's out there, because that's been the big initiative from this White House, is to eliminate waste and try to cut the budget down so we're not spending as much money, which I can certainly appreciate.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be the first to say I don't know enough about all of the ins and outs and how this all comes together. I have heard a lot that it is a negotiating tactic on his behalf. I am pretty clear this is a negotiating tactic that he's doing on the world stage that may have repercussions that he may or may not predict. I think he likes to draw lines in the sand and hopes that others will come to him. And he's doing this to a lot of different countries at once. And I am not a foreign policy expert.
Yeah, neither am I.
I don't know how all of this will play out. Seems risky to me, but I don't know the ins and outs of it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know.
So let's talk about what you do know, which is housing. And I think there's a couple key indicators here we need to watch next, because this stuff's going to be on again, off again all the time. I don't think this is going to change. It's politics. It's one of my least favorite topics that exist. There are three things we want to look at. And I think the first thing to consider is a lot of people are going to ask, don't tariffs raise prices? But it's not a yes or no. The Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, he explained the difference between inflation and tariffs in the All In podcast. He said that inflation comes from printing more money. So let's say the U.S. had $1 trillion. That's all we had. That's it, no more. And I want to buy a bottle of water, and you want to buy a bottle of water. One came from the U.S. and the other came from another country. And let's say the other country's Fiji, for Fiji water, right? And they tariff Fiji, then that water's $1.25, and the U.S. water, let's call it Aquafina, right? I get, and that's $1. That's on inflation. What inflation is, now you have $2 trillion, and that the U.S. water is $1.50 and the Fiji water is $1.25. Everything's more expensive. So I think that's the difference here that people don't really understand. Now they can drive up the cost of imported goods, which is bad news for a lot of home builders, because they rely on foreign-made lumber, steel, appliances, fixtures. The NAHB, the National Association of Home Builders, is already calling for some exemptions, and some builders are even building that pricing into their costs, and the cost increases into their pricing. So, if you look at this, the NAHB found that builders are expecting to see the average cost of a new home construction increase by $9,200. Not insignificant. I mean, that's a couple percentage points. I mean, that's basically 2% on the median around here. And that's what the tariffs could do. And I think we're going to see some goods go up, others go down. So they're probably not going to trigger broad inflation, and the Fed may not need to counter this with higher rates. But here's what to watch. I'm going to give you 3 indicators here. So the first is mortgage rates, because if the 10-year keeps falling and the market doesn't, which it didn't freak out over the Friday jobs report because unemployment went up, even though the jobs projected jobs were up substantially over the projection. Rates could keep sliding. Now, we already saw the mortgage rates jump back up. And what Tom Ferry was talking about, the market's rallied a little bit today. So that's a good thing, in my view. You don't want to see these things free fall. Builder confidence is another thing to look at, because higher construction costs, to me, are a real threat. I don't think we're as vulnerable here in the Northeast as you are in like Florida or Texas or some of these places where there's a lot of new construction. And if rates drop far enough, builders may be able to offset the tariff hit with more buyers entering the market. So there might be like a give and take there. The third thing to look at is the reciprocal tariffs, the retaliation. And that could invite retaliatory tariffs from other countries, creating longer-term economic turbulence, which is what we're talking about here.
And what we've already seen.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think China came out and they on Friday morning, they're levying 34% tariffs on U.S. goods, which is a notable decline in bond yields and caused the part of the stock market sell-off. So that's a pretty big jump. So, I mean, China came right back and said, hey, it's like, you push me, I'm going to push you, which is, and like this is why we got to let this play out a little bit. And I think the advice from Tom's pretty important, that you don't want to panic. So knowing that this is what we got to watch, right? Here's the question I'm going to ask, because I want to get your take on this. We're going to be doing a whole training on this tomorrow at our team, because I think there's a lot of consumers worried about this right now. What does this mean for me now? I wanted to buy a home, and now I'm a little unsure about it. I was thinking about selling. I'm a little unsure about this right now. I know you're talking about worst case scenario. How are you answering this question for people? Like, how are you talking to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think as in pretty much every situation, it comes down to motivation and what makes sense for you, and we can't time the market. Now, when there is a lot of uncertainty, it absolutely, makes it complicates things a little bit more. But knowing that you can't time the market, knowing if there is a major reason for the move, you kind of look at what can we do to make it happen, and know that no one here has a crystal ball, and no one will be able to predict if this was, the perfect time to do something or the worst time ever to do something. Mm-hmm. Like is often the case, it's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the first question I would ask people is like, hey, I'm nervous. I'd be like, hey, tell me more about what you're nervous about. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people don't know what they're nervous about. They're seeing all these headlines, and depending on which news channel you watch, you're going to get a totally different story, which is, it doesn't help, people actually understand what's going on. So I would be very cognizant of, hey, Sarah, tell me more about what you're nervous about. And then just see what they say, because they could be nervous about something. You can immediately show, hey, this isn't the case. It's no different than when people say, hey, prices are coming down, or, I get questions like, hey, is the market going to slow down? I was with a client yesterday. I said, well, we sold 15 homes last week, so that didn't really stop us there. And, we had many multiple offer situations. Mm-hmm. So that alleviated those concerns. They wanted to move ahead, and they're moving ahead because they have a motivation, right? So what do you understand about the economic climate, or what are you nervous about? That's a great question to ask. Instead of telling people, don't be nervous or listen, that's horrible. That's a horrible way to talk to somebody. Mm-hmm. So ask a question like that, see what they're actually nervous about, and then be ready to talk about, hey, here's the data that we saw. And we're very fortunate here. If you look at we're part of Bright MLS, which is a very large MLS. Well, they literally give you week to week statistics of what's going on with showings and purchase contracts and new listings. So this is the week ending April 6th. So this past week. So showings were down 10.7% compared to a year ago, but they're up 4.2% week over week. We know there's a little, less demand in the market, but the demand is picking up. Purchase contracts were up 3.5% week over week. We're seeing the median time to contracts 19 days. This is the data people want to see, and just you got to spend some time looking at this stuff, because if you don't, and they ask you, hey, I'm nervous, and you don't know what to say, then you're really in trouble.
Right. Yeah, no, I think asking questions and kind of getting to the root and not assuming that you know what they would be nervous about is the best way to start.
For sure. And I think that don't panic, right? Because we're seeing the market's already correct. This is kind of what happens after the Fed meets and they either cut rates or raise them. The market anticipates it, then things kind of calm down like a week later. And for the people that are out there that maybe have been having a hard time finding a home, this might be your opportunity, because there's going to be some people that pull out invariably. And usually it's because they maybe weren't that serious, or maybe they had a lot of money in the market and they took a big hit. I mean, everyone's got a different investment strategy. Don't make assumptions. Just ask better questions. Is probably the best piece of advice here.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're going to wrap it right there. So don't panic, everybody. That's the message here. We're going to come right back. We're going to talk about these office and private exclusive listings and how agents get selected and what consumers actually want from their agents, which, spoiler alert, it's probably a lot of the stuff we just told you to do on the show here. We'll be right back next on Toole Time Real Estate Radio on WWDB 860 AM. All right. Welcome back to Toole Time Real Estate Radio on WWDB 860 AM. I'm Tom Toole. She's Sarah Tymon. We both work at the Tom Toole Sales Group at RE/MAX Main Line, the #1 RE/MAX team in Pennsylvania since 2018. And we're going to share some actual statistics about office and private exclusive listings. This has been a nonstop talking point, and I'll share why we're doing that in a second. And we're also going to talk about how agents got selected last year and what consumers actually want, especially in this environment where we're hearing tons of noise about what's going on in the market. So we'll break it all down here for you next. If you get some value out of this or you like what you hear, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you need someone that's going to make sure you get the maximum amount for your home, click on the link, talk to Sarah. She's got a lot of happy listeners, happy clients right now, having a spectacular year, and she can give you the exact advice you need to make sure you're getting what you want when it comes to a real estate decision. So what do you know about these office and private exclusive listings? And I know you keep your eye on things. Tell me what you understand about them, because I think this is something that there's, I don't think a lot of consumers are understanding.
Sure. I know that there is a lot of debate about the legality of what needs to go up when, what needs to be public, what can be kept in-house. I think that people like, depending on the home and everything, people like the idea of, an office exclusive, and it says the word exclusive in it, and that feels special. But oftentimes, like, what a seller is looking for is, broadly, they want to net the most with the least amount of hassle. So keeping something in-house might not, that doesn't open the pool as large. So, it might not get you the offer that you could have gotten otherwise.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. And it's something that when I'm talking to a seller, they say, oh, well, these companies, they have these private exclusive listings. And my first question is, hey, what do you understand about them? Because I don't think they really get it. Like, it sounds cool. You're absolutely right. And when you look at the data on this, and I think this is there's a couple companies that are leading the charge in this, like clear cooperation stuff, but Bright did a report on office exclusives, and I'm just going to share the stats with you here. It's a small but growing part of the Bright marketplace. They're saying it accounted for nearly 8% of new listings in February of this past year. And what they talked about is that, one, it takes longer to sell when the broker pre-markets it as an office or a private exclusive by as many as 2 to 5 weeks. So,
but are there actual tracking measurements in place?
There are, because they have to file the paperwork with Bright, and then they track that time from when the paperwork's filed to when it actually sells. Okay. So knowing that the median time on market is like 19 to 22 days, you're almost doubling the amount of time it takes. Mm-hmm. Right? For a lot of people, that's at least a mortgage payment. That's real money, right? So that's the first thing I want to kind of debunk here. And they, right now, homes are selling in roughly 3 weeks. And they're, it's an average of 2, as many as 5 weeks longer to go under contract. And the second point is that there's no price advantage to the listing. They did a very in-depth analysis of sales activity where They control for a range of property characteristics, location, all the variables. And what came out of it is that they don't sell for more than homes that start in the MLS as a coming soon or an active listing status. And Bright's also got their off MLS report that says in the Metro Philadelphia area, homes not sold on the MLS go for 15.5% less than what they would normally go for. So the average price point in our marketplace is what, 450-ish? Mm-hmm. We'll call it that. So just to give some perspective, that's potentially $69,000 on the average price point home. So I have a hard time with these agents that promote this to clients because I don't see any benefit here to sellers. What's your reaction?
I think the only benefit is to the agents that are within that brokerage, because they can still take their clients that are buyers to listings and to see properties and to tour properties that are not office exclusives. And they've kind of hedged their office exclusives to give them an advantage because they're the only ones that can show it. But that doesn't mean that the seller's not getting, they're not reaping the benefits there. The agents are.
Well, yeah. And I mean, you look at this, I'll see these homes pop up on the MLS, and there's obviously companies that do this. And I'm like, man, I can't believe it didn't sell for more than that. And like that, this is just me seeing these things. So for the sellers that are listening out there, I think we got to be very cognizant that know what the benefits are. I mean, it may sound cool. I think you hit the nail on the head, like exclusive, private, right? It sounds fun, but I don't see a benefit to sellers. Now, for some people, they may have a privacy concern. They may have reasons they want to go private or off market or a pocket listing. If your reasons are outside of getting the best price and people competing, then it's a tough thing to do. So I just wanted to debunk all this here, and it flows beautifully into our next topic. Anything you want to add? I think we kind of covered it here.
No, I think that pretty much does it.
Awesome. So what I wanted to add was what agents are actually looking for, or excuse me, what buyers and sellers are actually looking for when it comes to an agent. So we've heard this before, and it's the 2025 NAR Home Buyer and Seller Generational Trends Report. So sounds very fancy. And when you look at this report here, it's come out every year since 2013, and they do this for a reason. They break down the different generations and what they like. So let's talk about selling a home first. So baby boomers make up the largest share of sellers at 53%. Any surprise there?
Nope.
So, and you know, when they look at the chart here, it's I got to try to zoom in here. So, I mean, you see the age of home sellers. That's easily the largest. Then you've got people 45 to 59 is 22%, 70 to 78 is another 22%, and then 35 to 44 is 14%. No surprise there. And more importantly, I think what you want to really look at here is what people are looking for and the hiring patterns. So this is a very long report. I got to get to the right page. So let's talk about the buyer side first, where, you know, what people are looking for from their agent is helping find the right home is 49%. So how do you address that when you meet with somebody?
I think having conversations about the basics of what it is that they're looking for, and then setting them up through a couple different avenues to get those homes in front of them. So I find the auto search very helpful because it can't be like, you can't be expected to every morning at 6 a.m. go through every property that potentially could have come up and get them out to all of your clients. That's not going to happen. You're going to miss a day, and that could have been the day the property came up. So I think having the auto search is key for making sure the information gets out to clients. Then I think, going through, and it could depend on the level of where this client's at for seriousness, time to transact, all different types of factors. But then you kind of hand comb through things and put properties in for individually send the properties saying hey, this one could fit your, hey, did you see this, and this about this one? Or kind of pointing out why it may work for them. If you've been sending stuff to them and if it's a small pool of properties that potentially are coming up because of different search criteria, if it's a criteria that could be adjusted, showing them those options. And then also I encourage, or like particularly early on, hey, let's go out and look at it anyway, even if it's not,
100%.
necessarily whatever, so that you can kind of get a feel for what actually matters to them. And then you can kind of hone in on your search from there. You always want to be like improving it and giving them other options.
Well, I love that. And I think that's, when agents talk about what they do best, they're like, oh, I'm the best negotiator. I'm the best at paperwork, right? These are fill in the blank contracts, by the way. So like, that's not something to brag about.
Mhm.
I don't know what you think about that. It's really finding the right home. And that's also the number one most difficult step in home buying, as rated in this report. 55% of people feel like finding the right property is the hardest thing, followed by paperwork, understanding the process and steps, saving for a down payment, which you can't help people with, or getting a mortgage. That's a personal thing. So, what you're talking about, Sarah, like setting up the tours, helping buyer identify the right homes, those sort of things, that the more proactive you are, the better. And I think that's going to be a lesson that's a hard lesson for a lot of people right now, because they're not used to being proactive.
Right. And I mean, something else that you can do, I think, for people who, if there is a specific neighborhood where like, we really want this, send out a letter to, if you can door knock, or if you can solicit in different areas, like send out a letter saying like, hey, I've got a buyer that really wants to be in this area, and like keep track of how many people you sent that to, because is it likely that you're going to get a hit from it and that this is going to be the right house for the buyer? Like, honestly, probably not. Like maybe, and that's amazing, but it can help you provide like some additional data there too, of like, hey, I've door knocked the whole neighborhood. I've sent this many letters. We've gotten 0 responses. I will keep like on this, but maybe we need to expand outside of this neighborhood, because, we sometimes getting no feedback from something, like that's also feedback.
Well, and the other thing too is when you're proactive like that, there's other opportunities that are going to come out of that. You don't know who's watching you. When people say, "Wow, this person's working really hard for their client," and they may say, hey, "I got your letter like 6 months ago. I'm thinking about moving," and that may be another way that this happens. And what a lot of folks don't get is that people are watching you when you don't even realize. I mean, and you have to be very mindful of how you're approaching everything, and how you're talking to these clients. So the biggest thing is you got to have a plan, right? And people you look at all the when you talked about the private exclusives, right? Well, that serves the agent. What are you doing to serve the client? And I think that's going to be your best bet when you look at how to figure those things out. On the seller side, sellers aren't shopping around for agents as much as you think. 81% of all sellers hired the first agent that they spoke to. Only 1% interviewed 4 or more agents. That's a lot of agents to interview, by the way. 66% found their agent through repeat business or a referral. And 72% of young sellers, I'm not sure what that means, they used a past agent or referral. And 37% of those young sellers gave 3 or more referrals to their agent after closing. And when you look at, just all sellers, if you break it down even further, 38% referred by friend, neighbor, or relative. 28% used the same agent as last time. So, I mean, that's where people are going. And that's why you got to make it about the client, not about you. And I think that's why you got to be careful with, pitching things that are clearly benefiting you and not the home seller.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that there is like value that you can bring for, not having it be an office exclusive, but like finding something off market. Like obviously that brings a lot of value to your client. I think the office exclusive, I guess for the buyer, they're potentially up against less competition, because there aren't as many people that would be in there looking for it. But it's just like, it's a smaller, from the seller standpoint though, that's a much smaller pool of people that are having access to it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so clear the best way to get the best price is get as many people interested as possible.
Right.
One of the things we talk about is how, hey, we're going to engage all the agents because they all have buyers that are out there looking right now. We know who the best agents are. And, some folks may not want to be dealing with the same, like a dual agency situation.
Right.
And that's, I mean, has that ever happened to you before where they're like, I'm out. I don't want to get involved in a dual agency situation when you're handling the listing?
Yeah, no, and it's something that I go over with clients in detail prior to it ever like coming up. And then, and it's always about what is the best interest for the client. So I've done dual agency before, and I've done it, and I've opted not to do it before, where it was like an option. And I said, no, I'm going to designate someone else because this would not be beneficial to either of you to do it as a dual agent. You both are going to, and I'm very glad that I did that. And then but I've also done situations where I have been the dual agent and they were smooth, clean, straightforward transactions. So if there's no harm to either side by representing both sides, in that case, it can be a little bit more streamlined because I'm making sure all the pieces are in place there to get everything through, but only in very certain situations does that work.
Yeah, and the challenge with dual agency is that one party doesn't feel good about it. Like then you're in a very adversarial situation, and you never want someone to be questioning what you're doing,
right.
And that has to do with how you present yourself, you talked about giving options, right? Like, hey, I don't have to do this. We'll get somebody else involved. That can show that you're prioritizing other things besides you getting two sides of a transaction, which is kind of the challenge with these private and office exclusives. Like, it sounds great for the brokerage, but not necessarily great for the client. So you look at all this stuff here, and the last thing I want to hit on is what we know how people found their agent. We know that, so that tells me you've got to be like speed and competency are really clear. If you're getting 81% of home sellers are hiring the first agent they talk to, you probably got a good chance if you can get in there and set an appointment and you don't say anything stupid.
Right.
I mean, so talk about like what your observations are there, how to prep for these appointments and handle them. And it sounds like availability and speed are going to be really important to a lot of folks.
Yeah, I think getting out there quickly at a time that like obviously works for their schedule, but don't, if you're talking to somebody and they're ready to meet, don't be like, all right, in 3 weeks, that's when it's like the most convenient time for me. Like by the time 3 weeks went by, if they are at a stage of like getting ready to do something, somebody else, they will have mentioned this to friends, to family, who inevitably will say, oh, talk to this person, So I think getting out there quickly, coming in prepared, and being able to go over the questions that they might have. If there's unknown things going into the appointment, I would say touching on that in advance, like, hey, I know we've got some stuff that we need to figure out. So I might not at the appointment, I'm going to be information gathering on these pieces. And then I'm going to be following up with you at blank time to get you the rest of that information. And then doing that, like following up when you say that you're going to follow up. Well, and don't just like leave it up to them. Like, don't leave the appointment as like, all right, I reviewed everything with you. Great. Go ahead and like contact me if you're ready to move forward. Don't do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's all of the above, right? And imagine you are interviewing, they're interviewing 2 or 3 agents. Well, who's going to stand out? The one that gets there fast, that sends information beforehand, ideally like a personalized video or something like that. They follow up afterwards. You're setting the expectation of how the transaction is going to go versus the person that just kind of shows up and they're like, hey, I'm here. And there's no prep work.
Right. And I mean, I think that, this is one part of the rest of their lives that they're also living and busy with. Right. Mm-hmm. So they could meet with you, they could like you, but if you're not a quick, easy, like if they have to dig for your information again, or if they have to be like searching for you for how to reach out, they're going to go to the person who probably just like reaches out to them. And it's like, oh yeah, let's get going. I don't want to like look through my old emails and whatever to find out who this other person's contact information was. Like there is absolutely a level of like ease that's going to play in.
Well, and when you make it hard for somebody, like I don't like having hard experiences outside of, outside of my career, right? Like I want easy, I want fast. My time is really valuable to me, to my family, to other people. I recently had to get a car for my wife, and I know the person who was at the dealership and said, "Hey, can you get me out of there in 10 minutes?" And he just laughed at me. He said, "How about 30?" I said, "I'm going to time you, and I'm leaving as soon as I'm done." She had to learn how to work the car and all that stuff. And That's valuable to me. Like,
what was his time? How
I was out there in like 20 minutes, so it was
Nice.
fine.
Good.
You know this person, so it's. But I was like, great, I'm out of here because if you ever go to a dealership, like sometimes you're there for hours.
Right.
It is miserable, and it's also someone I could trust, and it was repeat business that we've done that before. So all of those things really go a long way, and it's speed matters, availability matters, professionalism matters, and you're interviewing for a job here. Like, don't take this so lightly. This isn't a cavalier thing. Now I don't know about. I've definitely assumed I had some business before early in my career, and big mistake, blew it. I'm never doing that again. And people always say, "Oh, this is my friend. This is so and so." I don't care who they are.
Right. Yeah.
So follow the data. Everyone listening, especially if you're an agent, and have a plan. I think that's kind of the short of it here. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about this Jurassic Park-like moment we are in with the reincarnation of the direwolf. I don't know. We'll explain it next. This is just so fascinating to me. We're going to talk about it next on Tool Time Real Estate Radio on WWDB 860 AM. All right. We are back on Tool Time Real Estate Radio on WWDB 860 AM. I'm Tom Toole. She's Sarah Tymon. We both work at the Tom Toole Sales Group at RE/MAX Mainline, the #1 RE/MAX team in Pennsylvania since 2018. This story is so fascinating to me, Sarah. The return of the direwolf. So this was an extinct species that has been brought back through science and so we're going to talk about this all next. If you get some value out of this, or you like what you hear, make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you got some real estate needs unrelated to the direwolf, Sarah can help you with those. Just click on the link in the comments. Many happy listeners and clients have worked with Sarah over the past 24, 36 months. You will not be disappointed. So apparently this wolf roamed as far south as Venezuela and as far north as Canada, but there's been not one seen for 10,000 years because the species went extinct. There's been remains discovered all across the Americas, and there's this company called Colossal Biosciences, and they relied on deft genetic engineering and some of the remains, and they deciphered a genome, rewrote the genetic code. I'm already lost here, by the way. And all of a sudden, they rewrote the genetic code of the common gray wolf to match it, and they used domestic dogs as surrogate mothers. And there are now 3 separate direwolves last fall and this winter that de-extincted the line of these animals. This is mind-blowing to me.
Who's paying for this?
Well, obviously, that's a good question. Let's see who. Colossal Biosciences. So, I mean, they probably got some funding and all that.
It's like someone that's like a big fan of Game of Thrones.
I don't know. I mean, well, yes.
The direwolf. I saw that one of them's name is Khaleesi.
I did see that. I thought of Game of Thrones immediately when that happened. So, I mean, if you go on their website, it's obviously they probably have like some VC funding or something, I would imagine. And, if you look at, let's see here. I mean, it's so hard to tell who's behind these companies, but I mean, obviously somebody's paying for this for some reason, and it's on the cover of Time. So, I mean, it got a lot of people's attention. This is just wild to me. I can't get over this. I was shocked to see this, and then I see the stuff on social media like, hey, are we gonna bring back like raptors? Like, what's gonna happen? And it's gonna be a Jurassic Park sort of thing. And the company was founded in 2021. It employs 130 scientists, and the wish list of de-extinction they have is a woolly mammoth, the dodo, the Tasmanian tiger. So there was a 60 Minutes piece on this that like people are convinced this Tasmanian tiger still exists, and it's like a big fan club.
Oh my god.
So that was another thing. And like a woolly mouse, like all sorts of stuff here. This is just, what do you think about this? This is just insane to me. This is even happening. I'm totally fascinated here.
Yeah, I mean, I see here at the end that it says, well, they've had successes. To date, no animals have been rewilded.
Yeah.
Rewilded. So, I mean, I don't know if that's like putting too much, if depending on like what animals they bring back and how many of them, and if they release them, like what that does. And then if they're not going to release them, what is their life like? These poor guys, just like, being, I don't know. I mean, I know there's a lot of animals that are like protected or in zoos and different things like that. But if they're never going to get that and they're just going to be in a little like lab, I mean, I feel a little like, what's the point of bringing them back just so that they're like stuck somewhere?
Well, remember when they cloned that lamb like 30 years ago? Or the sheep. It was Dolly the sheep. And I mean, there's obviously like there's tons of examples of when there's species that get reintroduced into the wild that like bad things happen, right? I mean, there was a toad brought in years ago to kill off a bunch of beetles and ended up killing all the marsupials because they ate the toad and it was like poisonous. Bamboo is a great example. You know how many bamboo problems around here because it's not, and that's a plant. That's not even. Lower Marion Township has an ordinance against it. You got to pull it out. Like it's so. Yeah. I just don't know what this is going to be like, and I'm just. I mean, it seems like, are we going to have like dinosaurs? Like, I mean, is this really going to happen? I don't. This whole thing is wild to me. And I don't really get the end game. I mean, it's. Like, what's kind of the point?
Well, I'm wondering if there's like what types of like regulations they have to go through, or is there anything that has to like review this for like ethics, or like if it's allowed to be done, and like or would they draw the line for certain things that they would consider dangerous? Like the dire wolf is not a mouse. Like that is a large animal, but it's obviously not at the level of dinosaur. Which would be, we've seen how that goes in the movies. So yeah, I wonder like if this were to continue, would there have to be some type of like regulatory board if there isn't already one? Who would run it? And is that a good use as we're trying to cut government?
That's a great point. I think, like, there's a lot of money to be spending on this.
So I don't know. It's interesting though. I saw this pop up like on social media or something, I don't know, yesterday.
That's why I saw it too.
And I didn't like dig into it to read too deeply. I didn't realize that it was like genetically brought back in a lab. Like whatever I saw, I was just like, oh my God, how did it come back? I didn't like go through to see the details, but that's interesting that it's a group of scientists.
Well, what you're talking about, like, what do you do with these animals? Because, I mean, wolf packs typically are, they can be like 2 members, but they're typically like 15 or more. And the hunting territory for these animals is typically like 50 to 1,000 square miles. And, right now these animals are on a 2,000 acre preserve. So, I mean, it's like, you're like, what kind of life? They're trying to do this with a woolly mammoth. What do you do with a woolly mammoth? Like, where's it going to live? I mean, that's the.
Like we've got. If you want to save animals, there are enough that are like not yet extinct, but on the line. Like maybe like invest some things into that. Also, if you for some of these animals, if it was something where somehow you decided that you were going to re-release them, the impacts of what that does for the other animals in that area could be, just as the example that you gave there, could be awful. Or I don't know, like with so many, I mean, even just with like wolves that are out in the wild, the space that they have to be has already diminished, and they're hunting, and what their competition is higher. So introducing something else in there, now you're bringing something in that could destroy something else. So, and like, who are you to decide that you get to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So they also, it's funny you mentioned that, because they said just as important as the mission of this company to restore extinct species is to stop endangered ones from totally dying out. So they talked about the red wolf, which is an animal that's endangered, and they were able to clone 4 of those. Why we're not finding out about this until now, too? Like that, I think I'd be more interested in this than hearing about what's going on and the different views in the White House and all that stuff. This is much more fascinating to me. So. They did clone 4 red wolves, and they're trying to fortify the species, which I think that makes a good sense, a lot of sense. But they're apparently this species, they suffer from a genetic bottleneck, which is a lack of diversity in its genome that can lead to like infertility and inherited birth defects. So There's
This is the red fox.
the red wolf.
The red wolf.
So there's all sorts of stuff happening here, and they live in a separate fenced area in the same preserve as the dire wolf. So these animals have like no room to like run around.
Where is the preserve?
I don't know. Let's look this up here. Fossil Biotech Preserve location. Apparently it's in Dallas, Texas. So Texas is a big state. I mean, that makes sense. So do you think we're gonna see dinosaurs? This is what I want to know. What about the T-1000? Is Terminator gonna rule? I mean, are the movies happening, Sarah? Yes or no?
Like, yes.
Yes. All right. So watch out for the T-1000. Watch out for raptors, T-Rexes, all that stuff. Very fascinating story. Who would have thought this is happening in 2025? Hopefully you got some value out of this episode. You want to follow Sarah on Instagram. She's at Ty_TyTime. You can follow me at TomToole3RD. And we are streaming live every week on YouTube and Instagram. Just check us out at Tom Toole Sales Group. And we'll be back next week on WWDB 860 AM.